And depending on who you believe and what your opinion and all this stuff is like Kevyn Adams has apparently been one of the most active GMs all season trying to get trades done. Well, guess how many trades he's made in the season? 0. He got the cop out of Vancouver didn't move Pettersson, so what do you want me to do? The best case scenario was he was traded to the Sabres. The other best case scenario was he was traded to the Blue Jackets, so at least people could be like, Adams cannot get deals done. He just can't. He can't make that big acquisition, which he still can't. But right now he has a little bit of a cop-out on Vancouver didn't trade Pettersson. What do you want me to do? And to me, that's bogus. It's your job as a GM to make them want to make people want to trade with you. And this isn't even necessarily the Pettersson thing, but your whole deal was, we can't get players to come here because we're not a destination, trade protection, all this stuff. Why has Pettersson had no trade protection? You know who else didn't have trade protection? Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee. They didn't have trade protection. You know who else didn't have trade protection? Capo, defenseman Alexander Carrier, who was traded before the Christmas roster freeze. Like, have been players moved without trade protection that address needs of the Buffalo Sabres that Adams could have tried to go get. And if we don't want to talk about trades, there's waiver claims he could have made because Barry Kapanen was on waivers. Arthur Kaliev was on waivers. Lesser extent because he's clearly something's wrong with him off the ice, but Daniel Sprong was on waivers.
Nobody was taking Brandon Saad's contract, but that was another one.
No, but that's another one.
Yep.
Like, it is what it is. So it strikes me as very difficult to believe that a move will be made by the Sabres. I know before the Predators game on Friday, he said that he was looking to make a hockey trade, which is all fine and dandy. That's the trade you should be looking to make. And maybe there are some parallels to the Middlestat Byram trade last year where he's talked about wanting to sign players and then he went out and made a trade. But right now, it needs to be said, like, he struggles to make the big forward acquisition because he hasn't. If you count Alex Tuch, sure, but he was forced to make that Jack Eichel trade. Nothing against McLeod, nothing against Greenway. Those were all fine trades. They're not big-time forward acquisition. And I think that's why so many people bought into this Pettersson thing it was the perfect storm. A guy with 7 years on his contract who has scored 100 points, who is, as all we know, is friends with your captain. He has no trade protection. You have something that the Canucks want, and apparently they liked Bowen Byram and Dylan Cozens. It was just a perfect storm, and when it didn't happen, like most people, it was just, I don't think this is ever going to happen for Adams.
There's been 26 moves since the beginning of November, which was when the Sabres started to go on that slide. The Sabres have not been involved in any one of those moves. Some of them to a minor extent, some of them to a bigger extent. They made that one AHL swap with Colton Pullman that like nobody even remembers. Forgot to mention Isak Rosén got called up, so that's another big acquisition there for Adams. I mean, no disrespect to Isaac Rosén, but again, like just another call up from Rochester. Tyson Kozak has been in the lineup and out of the lineup and up and down. But again, we see these moves that have been made around the league. You already mentioned the Morgan Frost and Calgary-Philadelphia swap, which to me made 0 sense for Philadelphia, but I mean that's another story. We're not the Flyers podcast here, but like even the Mikko Rantanen trade, which was an insane trade by the way, in the middle of a season, I think it's good for both sides, given Rantanen's a pending UFA, and Necas will cost Colorado less, and he's having a career year. Yeah. Another guy that the Sabres could have got in the offseason, Martin Necas, but the price was too steep for Kevyn Adams, which again just makes you shake your head on that one. But you keep mentioning like these guys that have been traded that have been available. The Sabres are a last place team right now. It's not like they're sitting in a wild card spot or a top 3 team in the conference that doesn't want to make a ton of shakeups other than like rentals here and there. Like they have assets to be able to move. They have a lot of good prospects. They have the depth in their draft pick cupboard. They have some guys with term that, like you mentioned, the Cozens and those players and Byram are commodities around the league. Whether or not we think that they're doing well right now in the Sabres, they are coveted by other teams. And we saw, to me, the Rangers paid a discount for JT Miller, which it just seems like the Rangers always end up paying less for some reason than what the fair value should be. Like, no disrespect to Philip Hedl, he's a third-line player. They got a B-level prospect and a protected first-round pick, so, like, it's just, like, the Sabres could have matched that if they really wanted to, like, easily. The Sabres easily could have, outdone that trade for JT Miller, not that they would have taken him on, but there are these trades that we were seeing in the Pettersson deal that if the trade was good enough, Pettersson would be a Sabre because they would have taken that trade over the JT Miller trade easily with the return that they probably could have gotten for Pettersson, and whether that deal maybe gets done in the summer or if Vancouver just says now the problem's out, now Pettersson's like going to be our franchise player going forward. But it just frustrates you because you see so many moves going on that the Sabres have the assets to make, but Adams is apparently on the phone 24/7 talking trades, but then one never gets, nothing ever materializes.
Yeah, I think all intents and purposes, like the JT Miller one, I know he had the trade protection and he only wanted to go to New York and all that, blah, blah, blah. But by all intents and purposes, like, it seemed like a lot of the Canucks liked JT Miller. It seemed like a lot of the fans there liked JT Miller. It seemed like JT Miller liked being there. I have no idea what this rift with Pettersson is. No one knows. But it felt like, yeah, if you made a good enough offer, you could have pried Pettersson away. Now, again, Vancouver probably made the smart move, right? Not trading their 26-year-old former 100-point center. Like, I'm not, from a Vancouver standpoint, it makes sense to hold on to him if the offers weren't there. But I don't like that that's a cop-out for Adams. Like, Pettersson or not, there have been moves that could be made, and he hasn't made them. You can't sit there and tell me that this team wouldn't have benefited from some kind of change during that 13-game losing streak. Your season... Before that started, we were third place in the Atlantic Division.
Wild.
Even a month into that disastrous stretch, you were only 4 points behind the Detroit Red Wings. Now, we weren't firing the head coach because we just hired Lindy Ruff, but Detroit fired their head coach and they're 14-4-1 under Todd McClellan. So don't tell me a major shakeup, whether it's a player or a firing, doesn't make a difference. It could. Would it have? I don't know. But I watched this team play, and they have pieces. They have talent. They're the best first period team in the NHL. One of them. To me, the GM shoulders a lot of this blame. Pretty much. Not all of it, because the players deserve blame, right? The players also couldn't win games. But the GM saw it and did nothing. Now, if you think he's handcuffed by Pagula, that's a different story. But to me, it's be smart enough to work within the handcuffs then. I don't know what anyone's opinion on Joel Farabee is, but Joel Farabee is a player who's making $5 million. Is that a lot for what he's produced? Maybe. But he's making $5 million a year for 4 more years. He had no trade protection.
The Sabres have $15 million in cap space.
He's been available. You couldn't have done not necessarily right now. You couldn't have done that in the summer for that extra top 6 forward addition. Would it have made a difference? I have no idea. Morgan Frost was available. Has been available all year long. Couldn't have tried to go do something there. You know what I mean? It's just like, and now the Pettersson thing, it raises another question to me, which is if you were I don't know how close the Sabres actually were. I don't know how close Columbus was. I don't know how close Vancouver was to actually trading Elias Pettersson. But if that was there, what do you do if you're Kevyn Adams? Do you wait until the draft, or do you take those assets you were going to use for that and go big game hunting again? Because I know what I would like him to keep being aggressive and go big game hunting. But I don't until he does that. I don't think he's going to.
It's almost like, and again, this is just me thinking about it. It was almost like Colorado and Carolina pulling off that Mikko Rantanen and Nietzsche swap out of nowhere. Really might have caught some other GMs off guard, and then Vancouver lost another option in Carolina because they had been talked about for Pettersson or Miller. And once Carolina went out because they went and got Rantanen in that trade, it almost like left like the Rangers were the only possibility for Miller. And then it opened the door for Columbus and Buffalo to get in on Pettersson. But it was almost like that trade kind of like, shook up the rest of the GMs as just a wild, massive superstar for potential superstar trade out of nowhere in the middle of the season, that it was like, wow, these trades can get done, because we've always been told, oh, these trades can't get done in the season. They got to wait till the summer. Well, we just saw one happen. So if Kevyn Adams could have made one, he would have by now. And if the assets are there and if the trade's there, make it. Why wait till the deadline? Why sit on your $15 million in cap space right now, or whether that's less with the internal cap or anything like that? It just seems like they're making a lot of excuses when like you said, they have the ability to go hunting. They have the cap space that a lot of teams don't have. They have the draft capital. They have the prospect pool, one of the best in the National Hockey League, to go out and make these moves that some of these other teams couldn't do, and they're not using it to their advantage.
Yeah, and I'm not going to touch on it too much because we'll probably do it on the trade deadline preview episode, but it's why I'm hesitant to even pursue a trade of a guy like Zucker or a Greenway, like a pending UFA, because if someone gives you a second or a first round pick or whatever, I don't trust Kevyn Adams to use that currency to go get something good, because he hasn't done it yet. The closest thing he did was traded Savoy for McLeod, which has been a good trade. McLeod's on pace for a career year here. That's a fantastic trade, but that's not the difference maker that he's needed to step up and make. And that wasn't a first round pick. He drafted Savoy and then moved on from him. It's the guy. I'm not going to say he doesn't have limitations or restraints on him. I'm sure he does. I'm sure there's a reason that, they are using the cap space that they are using and all this bogus things that the owner might be impending on this team. But that doesn't mean you just do nothing. You find a way to work within whatever restraints you have on you. You have players that people want. There are players out there that don't have trade protection. Now, if you want to give me the excuse that none of those players were moved, bull crap. Make them want to get moved. That's your job. Like, I'm not telling you to trade Dylan Cozens for a bag of pucks, but if someone wants to have a legitimate conversation about Dylan Cozens, you have those legitimate conversations. And if you can't get those legitimate conversations to eventually lead to a impactful trade, either one, your assets value is not as much as you think it is, which I honestly don't know what Cozens' value around the league is. I have no idea. He's clearly not playing well, and he's on a 7-year contract. So I don't know what his value is. But if you can't get a real trade package for a player like him, one, your asset's just not good enough. So you have to eat it, which is not a good thing because you, Kevyn Adams, committed money to that asset. Or two, other teams just don't take you seriously as a GM. And I think that that's probably pretty likely at this point. I don't know how many teams take Kevyn Adams serious as a GM in the NHL because has he made some good moves? Yes, he absolutely deserves credit for some of the moves that he has made. But when the team has needed a top 6 forward for 3 seasons now, and the closest we've gotten, this is not a shot at Jason Zucker, but the closest we've gotten to that acquisition is Jason Zucker. And that was a 1-year deal, which we don't know if he's even going to be here past this year. Like he's just, I don't know. I struggle to, I don't want to rag on him and say he sucks as a GM because I don't think he sucks. He's made some smart moves, but he's lacking in areas that GMs I don't think should be lacking. Like it's been 5 years. You're not learning anymore. You need to take that next step. You've said it yourself. We need to take that next step. You as a GM haven't really done anything to help your team take that next step.
Do you think if he had the urgency or knew that if they didn't get in this year that he wouldn't be the general manager come next season, then he would be moving hell and high water to make a move to be able to bring somebody in here to make the playoffs? But obviously that's, where they're given in the standings right now, that seems like a pipe dream at this point. But if I was in that spot and I knew that this was my final year to make the playoffs, I'd be trying and moving everything, trying to make something stick on the wall.
Well, one, it's kind of why I think he's clearly not acting like a GM who's worried about losing his job. Fair to say.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
But you look at it from the common sense side, whether it's, I'm going to say this, the Elias Pettersson trade. I'm going to use that as an example because that's one that was a realistic option. This applies to any major trade that you can make. Right now, trading for a guy like Elias Pettersson, I said it on Twitter, it has 3-pronged effect. One, gives your fans a reason to watch the rest of the year. You're telling me people wouldn't be interested to see a player like Elias Pettersson join this team, and people would go watch to see what that looks like.
His jerseys be flying off the shelves. 2,
it shows Dahlin, Thompson, Tuck, who has 1 year left on his contract after this year's over. Like, it shows those guys, hey, I'm serious here. I'm going to try to make this team good. 3, it shows, now this needs a lot more work because you would need to not only do a move like this, but also show that you're going to keep winning. But at least it shows some potential free agents out there or guys with trade protection. Like, I'm trying to make my team have some respect around here. It has 3... And yes, don't get me wrong, there is downside if you trade for a struggling center with $11 million. But how much more negative can things get for the Sabres? We're on year 14. Until I see some significant improvements, I'm just going to assume it's going to be year 15 after this year. Because I know everyone was happy about the salary cap going up, but guess what? The Sabres are just a J.J. Peterka and Ryan McLeod contract away from hitting the cap floor. That's it. That's it.
And, I mean, if you look at the cap and Dylan Cozens, I mean, if you put him in the deal, he's making, 7.1?
Yeah.
And then you subtract what Pettersson's making, it's still a win.
If the rumor was true for Byram and Cozens, the money was a wash.
Yeah.
A guy like Byram is a guy they need to make a decision on because he's a pending RFA. And if he doesn't want to be here, you're getting 2 years max, and then he'll walk to UFA status.
We know that's so
either
disaster.
One, if you value him as a long-term piece, you better show him that you're serious. Or two, if you don't value him as a long-term piece, you better sell high on his value and get something that can keep your team, help your team.
Now, at least Middlestat hasn't been a world beater this year in Colorado. It sounds like he might even be on the block.
Yeah, the Byram Middlestat trade, I have no regrets with that. I give Adam some credit for that. He appears to have gotten whatever value he can out of Byram, and Byram and Dahlin have played well together. Like I said, the issue is Byram doesn't play well with anyone else, so it's either Byram, you're here and you're on my number one pair, which I think at this point Rasmus Dahlin can play with anybody and have success, but you kind of have to make your decision on Byram because he's a pending RFA and he needs a contract, and I don't know if you can get him to sign here for more than 2 years because what have you shown him since you acquired him that signing here long term is something he should do for his career? I know he's already won a cup, but please, he's not going to commit to a long term contract here. Why would he? Or if he does, you got to pay him a lot of money, and I don't know how much money you necessarily want to be paying him.
We've seen him frustrated at times this year too.
I mean,
he's not used to this. Like with Colorado, he's not used to this.
No, it's like I said, the GM has done some good. So I'm not saying he's the worst GM in the league. Well, he might be. I'm not saying he's the worst GM Buffalo's ever had. He's done some good things, but he's not. His signature trade is Eichel, and that trade was forced upon him. Outside of that Eichel trade, his signature trade is Byram for Middlestat. And while that's a fine trade, but that hasn't. You subtracted a top 6 center, top 6 forward, and you replaced that with Kulich, I guess. But even then, that took till 5 games ago when Kulich was the number 1 center. So
and he's lucky that Kulich was that good that quickly.
Yeah, but the two biggest needs for this team have been a partner for power and a top 6 scoring forward. And those have been the two biggest needs for 3 years. And they've yet to be addressed. So it's like all the good that he might have done is overshadowed by that. And, oh, by the way, like, how many GMs in this league would go through a 13-game win streak and not do something to shake up their organization? Now, again, he wasn't firing Lindy Ruff, and I don't, like, obviously not. But you didn't waive anybody, you didn't claim anybody, you didn't make a trade.
When there were trades to be had.
There's a reason that the Sabres have no respect amongst fans and players. And it's because they've proven time and time again they're not serious about winning. That's why making a big trade right now proves it could get you some little respect back. And it's why I think they should be doing.
No.
I know people are worried if Cozens goes on and wins a cup somewhere else, but I do not care. He does not look good here. He doesn't.
If he becomes the next O'Reilly, Eichel, Reinhart, whatever at this point.
Live with it. You've already done it 5 times. It can't get any worse.